When humanity owes you a favor, prepare for the unimaginable. The universe is vast and filled with countless alien species, many of whom view humanity as just another fledgling race, a speck in the grand cosmic tapestry. Most of them, with their advanced technology and centuries of experience, would have easily dismissed Earth and its inhabitants as insignificant. But that was before the favor. Jax-Thar, a fierce warrior from the planet Zorith, had never expected to owe anyone a favor, least of all a human. Zorith had been at war with a rival species, the Vrax. For centuries, both sides had advanced weapons that made battles across star systems seem like casual skirmishes. Despite Zorith's superiority in terms of strength and firepower, the Vrax had the upper hand in strategic warfare. They had just about crushed every other civilization in the galaxy under their boot, and it was only a matter of time before they turned their eyes on the Zorith homeworld. Jax-Thar, the proud leader of Zorith's elite warriors, had never been one to ask for help. To him, relying on others was a sign of weakness. But one particular day, everything changed. The Vrax had launched a devastating surprise attack. Jax-Thar's fleet, one of the most formidable in the galaxy, was outmaneuvered and outgunned. The Zorith were losing, and their only hope lay in an alliance with another species. Desperation led them to contact humanity, a race that had only recently discovered interstellar travel. The meeting was a tense one. Human representatives, led by Commander Kara Henderson, initially viewed the request for aid with suspicion. Humanity had barely recovered from their own interplanetary conflicts and had no interest in getting involved in a galactic war. But Commander Henderson, ever the diplomat, saw something in Jax-Thar's eyes, something she couldn't quite place, but it made her hesitate. After hours of negotiation, a deal was struck. Humanity would send a fleet of ships to assist Zorith, but in exchange, Jax-Thar and his people would owe humanity a favor. The terms were vague, but both sides knew the risks. It was the favor that would change everything. The human fleet arrived just in time. The Vrax were surprised, and the tide of battle shifted. With the combined might of human ingenuity and Zorathian strength, the Vrax were driven back. The war was far from over, but the balance of power had been altered, and the Zorith, for the first time in decades, could breathe. Jax-Thar, standing on the bridge of his flagship, watched as the human fleet made their departure. Commander Henderson's words echoed in his mind: humanity owes no one, but when we lend a hand, we expect more than a simple thank you. Time passed, and the Zorith began to rebuild. Jax-Thar, now deeply respectful of humanity, had thought the favor would be forgotten, but the day came when it was called in. A Vrax warlord, Kazul, who had been one of the most brutal leaders during the war, escaped into deep space. His new weapon, a terrifying quantum cannon capable of annihilating entire planets, was ready to be unleashed. The Zorith and their allies were powerless to stop it. No one had the technology to match its destructive power. That was when Commander Henderson's voice crackled through Jax-Thar's communicator. "You're going to need help, Jax-Thar," she said, her tone serious, "and we're here to deliver." Before Jax-Thar could even respond, his ship was surrounded by a fleet of human vessels, hundreds of them, each one bristling with advanced weaponry. But it wasn't the firepower that shocked Jax-Thar, it was the ships themselves. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. Sleek, silent, and with technology so advanced that it made even the Vrax's best look like primitive toys. Humanity doesn't do favors the way other races do, Commander Henderson continued. When we help, we don't just stop at a simple solution. We're going to make sure Kazul never threatens anyone again. Are you ready? Jax-Thar didn't hesitate. Ready. The humans deployed their fleet, not in a traditional formation, but in a method that defied the very laws of warfare. They formed a defensive web around the Zorith ships, a barrier of energy and technology that shielded them from Kazul's quantum cannon. But that was just the beginning. In an act of unimaginable ingenuity, the humans didn't simply disable the weapon, they hacked into its core, turning the quantum cannon back on the Vrax warlord's fleet. The resulting explosion decimated the Vrax ships in a flash, and Kazul was obliterated before he could even react. The Zorith watched, awestruck, as the human fleet began to withdraw. The Vrax had been defeated, not through brute force, but through intelligence, creativity, and sheer audacity. Jax-Thar turned to Commander Henderson. his eyes wide with disbelief. "How did you?" She smiled. "That's the thing, Jaxthar. Humanity doesn't just give favors. When we owe someone, we don't just meet the expectation, we blow it out of the water. We make the unimaginable happen." And with that, humanity disappeared into the stars, leaving behind a galaxy that would forever remember the moment when the unimaginable became reality. The favor had been paid, and it was far more than Jaxthar, or anyone, could have ever expected. Humanity, it seemed, didn't just survive the impossible, they thrived on it. When humanity owes you a favor, prepare for the unimaginable. Part 2. The universe had been quiet for several months since humanity's remarkable intervention in the war against the Vrax. The Zorith, having been saved and aided by humanity, had begun rebuilding their shattered civilization. But despite their newfound strength, Jaxthar couldn't shake the feeling that the cosmos was a far more dangerous place than he'd once believed. And his debt to humanity, though seemingly repaid, felt like it hadn't truly been settled. Jaxthar sat on the balcony of his warship, staring out at the stars. His people were safe, and the Zorith homeworld was healing. Yet, there was an unspoken tension in the air, something looming just beyond the edges of the galaxy. He had spent his life preparing for war, but what humanity had shown him, what they had done, was far beyond anything he had ever considered. The call came late that night, a soft hum in his communicator that would alter the course of everything. He recognized the signal immediately, Commander Kara Henderson. "Jaxthar," her voice crackled through the static, calm but with a note of urgency. "We need your help. The favor's not over yet." Jaxthar's heart sank. "What is it this time, Commander?" "We've repaid our debt. The Vrax are no more." "Not quite," she replied, her tone sharp. "There's something else out here, something older and more dangerous than anything we've ever encountered. It's a threat that could destroy everything. We've located it in the Helios Nebula. We need you and your fleet." Jaxthar's eyes narrowed. "A threat worse than the Vrax?" "Yes, worse. And it's unlike anything we've faced before." Jaxthar knew that tone. He had seen it in the eyes of commanders just before the most deadly battles. He also understood the weight of a favor from humanity. It wasn't a mere trade. It was a bond, a promise of unimaginable solutions to impossible problems. "I'll assemble the fleet," he said with resolve, already making his way to the command center. The Zorith would not refuse a human call for aid, not after everything they'd done for them. Hours later, the combined fleets of Zorith and humanity met at the edge of the Helios Nebula, a swirling mass of gas and dust. The nebula was beautiful, but it hid a deadly secret. Scanners had detected an anomaly in its depths, something that defied all known laws of physics, something that wasn't supposed to exist. Jaxthar stood beside Commander Henderson on the bridge of the flagship, staring at the nebula. The humans had already begun their preparations, moving swiftly and with a sense of purpose he had come to respect. They were not like any other species he had encountered. They were unpredictable, their strategies often defying conventional wisdom. "Do you know what we're dealing with?" Jaxthar asked, his voice laced with concern. Henderson turned to him, her face grim. "We think it's a remnant of an ancient race, the Eternals, a species long forgotten. They were believed to have mastered time, space, and reality itself before they vanished. But their technology? It survived. And now, something from their past is waking up." Jaxthar's fists clenched. A threat like that, something older than the stars themselves, was not a war he had trained for. The Zorith fought with strength, with firepower, with the will of their people. But what could they possibly do against an ancient force that controlled the very fabric of existence? The answer came swiftly. Suddenly, the sensors screamed a warning. A colossal rift appeared in the heart of the nebula, crackling with energy beyond comprehension. It was as though the fabric of the universe itself had torn open, and from within the rift emerged a ship, a vessel so massive and ancient that it made every ship in their fleet look like toys. Its surface was covered in strange, shifting symbols that seemed to defy all logic, glowing with an eerie green light. It was a ship unlike anything they had ever seen, and it wasn't alone. The rift pulsed again, and suddenly, hundreds of smaller ships, each one radiating the same ancient energy, flooded into the space around them. They were not attacking, not yet, but the sense of dread was overwhelming. They were waiting, as though contemplating something terrible. Henderson's voice was quiet but firm. Humanity doesn't back down from impossible odds, but we need a plan, now. Jaxthar looked at the fleet of human ships. Their technology, far beyond anything he had ever imagined, now felt like their only hope. I'll send my best warriors to assist. We can board their ships. Disable their systems? No. Henderson interrupted, her voice cutting through the tension. This isn't a battle you can fight the old way. These ships are alive. They're linked to something beyond comprehension. We need to shut down their connection to the rift, or everything will be swallowed by it. Jaxthar's mind raced. And how do we do that? Henderson took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing as she studied the advancing fleet. We need to break their reality control. We'll need every ship to fire on the rift simultaneously, but not with conventional weapons. This is where humanity's advantage lies. We can breach their reality field by syncing our energy sources to their own. Jaxthar blinked, momentarily lost in the complexity of her words. How do we sync our energy? Commander Henderson's smile was a rare one of fierce confidence. That's the favor, Jaxthar. Humanity doesn't just fight. We innovate. We create solutions no one else can even dream of. And then the unimaginable happened. The human ships deployed a weapon Jaxthar had never seen before, a brilliant cascade of energy that sparked across the fleet, syncing with the Zoratha's own firepower. The beams of energy shot toward the rift, striking its core with pinpoint precision. For a moment, the universe seemed to freeze in place. Then the rift exploded. The blast was unlike anything Jaxthar had ever witnessed. The ancient ships, as if caught in a wave of destruction from the very fabric of spacetime, disintegrated into nothingness. The rift collapsed, and everything around them fell silent. Jaxthar stared in awe. The impossible had been achieved, and it was humanity's creativity, its ability to think beyond the limits, that had turned the tide. We didn't just save the galaxy, Henderson said quietly, turning toward him with a determined look. We rewrote reality itself. That's what happens when you owe a favor to humanity. Jaxthar's voice was filled with awe and gratitude. I will never underestimate humanity again. And from that moment on, Jaxthar knew one thing above all else: when humanity owed you a favor, you could expect the unimaginable, and it would always be more than you could ever hope for. When humanity owes you a favor, prepare for the unimaginable. Part 3. The dust from the collapsed rift settled over the void, and the shattered remnants of the ancient ships that had once haunted the edges of space drifted like forgotten ghosts. Jaxthar stood in stunned silence, watching as the once invincible fleet of the Eternals crumbled into nothingness. The magnitude of what humanity had just accomplished was beginning to sink in, but there was still one question lingering in his mind. How? How had they done it? Commander Henderson stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the now vanished threat. There's something you need to understand, Jaxthar, she said, her voice steady but carrying a certain weight. Humanity doesn't just solve problems, we rewrite the rules of what's possible. Jaxthar glanced at her, still processing the enormity of the event. But that was a force older than the stars themselves. No one could have imagined defeating it. Henderson's lips twitched into a small, confident smile. That's where you're wrong. We didn't defeat it with force or brute strength. We didn't even defeat it at all. We just redirected its energy, made it work for us. That's how humanity survives. Jaxthar turned his gaze back to the stars, his thoughts in turmoil. He had been a warrior for his entire life, taught to value power above all else. Strength, firepower, and dominance, those were the tenets he had lived by. But humanity had shown him something else, a kind of strength born not from sheer might, but from imagination, ingenuity, and a refusal to accept limits. I've seen what you're capable of, Commander, Jaxthar said slowly. But what if the next threat is even worse than the Eternals? What if there's something we can't outthink or outmaneuver? Henderson's smile softened, but there was no doubt in her voice. Then we find another way. That's the human spirit, Jaxthar. We never stop. We adapt. We evolve. And if necessary, we innovate again. Before Jaxthar could respond, a voice crackled through the ship's comms system, pulling him back to the present. Commander Henderson, Jaxthar, there's something you need to see. The two of them exchanged a glance before rushing to the ship's operations center. On the screen, a new image had appeared, a strange symbol, one that had never been seen before. It was burned into the fabric of space itself, floating ominously just beyond the edge of the nebula. Henderson's eyes narrowed. What is that? We've never encountered anything like it. Jaxthar leaned in closer, his sharp eyes tracing the symbol. It was alien, almost otherworldly in its design, but there was something familiar about it. Something that tugged at the edges of his memory. He had seen symbols like this once before, on a ruined planet his people had encountered during the war. A planet that had once been home to a highly advanced civilization, now lost to time and decay. That symbol, he muttered. It's the same as the one we found on the old world, the one we thought was abandoned. Henderson's face grew grim. If that's true, then the Eternals weren't the only species who had this kind of technology. We might be dealing with something even older. A sense of foreboding crept into the room as the symbol on the screen pulsed with an unnatural energy. It was as though it was calling to them, beckoning them forward, daring them to investigate further. But Jaxthar knew better than anyone the danger of such unknowns. It was clear, whatever lay behind that symbol, it wasn't something they could simply ignore. We need to investigate, Jaxthar said, his voice low but firm. But carefully. If we're dealing with something older than the Eternals, then this could be far worse than we ever imagined. Henderson nodded, her expression steely. Agreed. But this time, we don't go in alone. Humanity owes you another favor, Jaxthar, and this one is going to require everything we've got. Hours later, the combined fleets of Zorith and humanity were moving toward the heart of the mysterious anomaly. The symbol had grown larger on their scanners, becoming more distinct, more solid. It was as though it was drawing them in, becoming more real the closer they got. As they entered the area surrounding the symbol, the fabric of space itself seemed to warp. Time and space stretched and twisted in unnatural ways. Their ships began to flicker in and out of existence, warping in and out of reality. Crew members shouted in alarm as their readings became erratic, and the gravity well fluctuated dangerously. It was as if they had entered a different dimension entirely. "Commander, what's happening?" Jaxthar asked, his voice tense as he gripped the armrest of his command chair. Henderson's brow furrowed as she studied the data. It's like we've entered a dimensional rift. Whatever is behind that symbol, it's not just advanced technology. It's manipulating the very laws of physics. We need to figure out how to stabilize this before we're torn apart. Can your ships handle it? Jaxthar asked, though he had already seen the incredible resilience of human technology. We'll try, Henderson replied, but we're pushing the limits. Humanity's ingenuity got us this far, but we're heading into uncharted territory. Suddenly, the symbol on the screen flared to life, a bright burst of energy cascading outward. In that instant, the Zorith and human fleets were thrown into chaos, their ships spiraling through the warping rift, pulled in all directions. In the distance, Jaxthar saw something emerge, a massive structure, unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a colossal station, ancient beyond measure, its surface covered in more strange symbols. The very essence of the station seemed to vibrate with a power so immense, it felt as though the universe itself was holding its breath. "We're going in," Henderson ordered, her voice cutting through the panic. "Prepare for everything. We don't know what we're up against, but we're going to find out. Humanity and Zorith, together, no turning back." Jaxthar stood tall beside her, his fists clenched. "We've faced the unimaginable before. We'll face it again." And with that, they moved forward, into the heart of the unknown, where even humanity's boundless creativity would be tested to its limits. The unimaginable was no longer a possibility, it was a certainty. And this time, it wasn't just humanity that owed a favor. It was the universe itself. When humanity owes you a favor, prepare for the unimaginable. Part 4. The colossal station loomed before them, its ancient surface gleaming in the void like a silent sentinel of forgotten eons. It was a structure so vast that even the combined might of the Zorith and human fleets seemed insignificant in comparison. Every inch of its surface seemed to pulse with an energy that was both alien and familiar, a force so powerful that it made Jaxthar's instincts scream to retreat. But there was no turning back now, they had come too far. "Steady, everyone," Commander Henderson's voice came over the comms, calm and unwavering. "We don't know what's inside, but we're going in. All ships, stay in formation. Prepare to deploy teams." Jaxthar could feel the tension radiating off the Zorith warriors around him. Their weapons were ready, their ships at the ready, but even they could sense the enormity of the task ahead. Humanity and Zorith had faced impossible odds before, but what lay beyond this station was something neither of their races could fully understand. An ancient race, technology beyond comprehension, and a rift in space-time that defied everything they knew. It all pointed to something far more dangerous than the Vraks, the Eternals, or any other foe they had ever faced. "Commander," Jaxthar spoke, his voice steady but filled with awe. "What do we know about this place? Its purpose? Its origin?" Henderson was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the station ahead. "Not much. We know it's been here for longer than any known civilization, longer than even the Eternals. The symbol we've been tracking? It's part of a language we've never seen before. And the rift, it wasn't a coincidence. It's not just an entry point. It's a beacon. It's calling something." Jaxthar narrowed his eyes. "Something else?" "Yes," Henderson confirmed. "Something older. Something that predates even the Eternals. If the legends are true, it's a force that could reshape the entire universe. This station, this rift, this is the key." The Zorith leader's thoughts raced. The universe was vast, and in all his years of fighting, he had encountered countless threats, many of which were too terrifying to contemplate. But this was something different. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and now it was his turn to stand beside them again. "Let's move forward," he said, his voice resolute. "We're not leaving this place until we know what's behind it." As the combined fleets slowly approached the station's outer rim, the massive doors to its interior slowly began to open. The structure's surface rippled like water disturbed by a stone, as if the very essence of the station was alive and aware of their arrival. A dark, cavernous expanse stretched before them, illuminated by a faint, otherworldly glow. The interior was as silent as death itself, but the feeling of power, the feeling of something ancient, was suffocating. "We'll send in a team to investigate," Henderson ordered, her voice cold but filled with determination. "Jaxthar, you're with us. The Zorith have experience with ancient ruins, and I trust your instincts. We need to know what's inside." Without hesitation, Jaxthar nodded. "I will not let you down, Commander. We will face whatever is in there together." The air inside the station felt different, heavier, thicker, as if the very atmosphere carried the weight of centuries of forgotten knowledge. The team advanced cautiously, weapons at the ready, their footsteps echoing through the seemingly endless hallways. It was clear that this place had been abandoned for eons, yet it felt as though someone, or something, was watching them. "Something's not right," one of the Zorith warriors muttered, his voice low. "I can feel it." Henderson held up a hand to signal the team to stop. "Stay sharp," she ordered. "Whatever this place is, we have to assume it's dangerous." They continued forward, but the deeper they ventured, the stranger things became. The walls were adorned with symbols, more of those cryptic markings that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of observation. The air hummed with an energy that seemed to pull at their very being. It was as if the station itself was alive, breathing, watching, waiting for them to make a move. Finally, they reached the heart of the station. A massive chamber, its center dominated by a vast, swirling vortex. The vortex glowed with the same unnatural energy that had pulsed in the symbol they had seen before. It radiated an ancient, malevolent power, an energy so intense that it felt as though it could tear apart the fabric of space and time itself. "This is it," Henderson breathed, awe and fear in her voice. "The heart of the rift." Jaxthar studied the vortex carefully, feeling its pull. "It's drawing us in. Whatever controls this station controls everything in this region of space." He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the strange, shifting symbols around the vortex. There, at the center of the chamber, was a pedestal, a dark, crystalline structure that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the vortex. "That's the source," Jaxthar said. "It's not just a station, it's a power core, a conduit for something beyond our understanding." Henderson stepped closer, her voice low. "And if we destroy it? We could destabilize the rift," Jaxthar warned. "But it may also release something far worse, something that we're not prepared to fight." Before anyone could respond, the chamber seemed to tremble. A low, resonant hum filled the air, and the walls flickered with a strange light. The vortex spun faster, and the symbols around them began to glow brighter, faster, as if reacting to their presence. Then, without warning, a figure emerged from the vortex. It was humanoid, but not entirely. Its body was made of shifting, liquid-like energy, constantly changing shape, like a being that existed outside of time and space. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were endless black voids, absorbing the light around them, and its presence was oppressive, its mere existence bending the laws of reality. Henderson raised her weapon, but Jaxthar stopped her. "No," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is not something we can fight." The entity spoke, not in words, but in a voice that resonated in their minds, a voice that seemed to come from every direction at once. "You have awoken the Eternal Watcher." Its voice was ancient, reverberating with the weight of millennia. "You are not the first to come here. Many before you have tried to disrupt the balance, but you will not succeed. I am the keeper of the rift. I am the force that binds reality together. You cannot destroy what was never meant to be understood." Henderson stepped forward, her voice steady despite the overwhelming presence of the entity. "We don't want to destroy it. We want to understand it. What is this place? Why was it built?" The entity seemed to pause, as if considering her words. "Understanding is a dangerous pursuit. Some truths are not meant to be known. Some forces should remain hidden. But your kind is different. Perhaps you are ready to learn." Jaxthar felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you want from us?" "I require a sacrifice," the entity said, its voice filled with ancient sorrow. "A balance must be maintained. A cost must be paid for meddling with the fabric of existence. Will you pay the price, or will you allow the universe to unravel?" The room seemed to tilt, as if the very fabric of reality was warping around them. The choice hung in the air like a heavy weight, and Jaxthar felt the immense responsibility of it. This wasn't just about the Zorith, or humanity, it was about the very nature of the universe itself. Henderson turned to Jaxthar, her eyes filled with resolve. "What do we do?" Jaxthar took a deep breath, his thoughts racing. "We find the balance. We pay the price, together. When humanity owes you a favor, prepare for the unimaginable." Part 5. The presence of the Eternal Watcher loomed over them like a great weight. The very air around Jaxthar, Commander Henderson, and their teams vibrated with the power it emanated. Each word from the entity sent tremors through the chamber, reverberating in their minds, making every thought feel distant in a way that made even the smallest decisions feel like monumental undertakings. "We have to understand," Henderson said, her voice unwavering as she stood tall before the entity. "Whatever price must be paid, we need to know what's at stake. The rift, this station, it's all connected to the very fabric of reality. The universe could unravel if we don't get answers." The Eternal Watcher's shifting form pulsed in rhythm with the energy of the vortex. It observed them, not with eyes, but with a cosmic awareness that was too vast to comprehend. "Answers are not always a gift," it intoned, its voice vibrating through the chamber, distorting reality with each word. "Understanding comes with a cost. Are you willing to pay it?" Jaxthar stepped forward cautiously, his every instinct telling him to be cautious, yet knowing this was their only chance. "What cost?" he asked, his voice steady, though the weight of the moment pressed on him. "What is the price for the knowledge we seek?" The entity seemed to shimmer, its form stretching and distorting. "Time," it said simply. "The price is time, your people's time. The rift has existed for eons, and with every passing moment, reality teeters on the edge of collapse. You will offer your years, the time you hold dear, to preserve what was meant to be lost. A sacrifice, small to you, yet infinite in its cost. What will you give to save your universe?" Henderson's expression remained stoic, though the weight of the words was clear. She turned to Jaxthar. "Is it true? Can we survive without the knowledge it holds?" Jaxthar's mind spun with the implications. They were asking for their time, their lives, their future. To let go of the one thing each living being held most dear, time itself. In a way, it seemed almost trivial compared to the cosmic threat they faced. But to humanity and the Zorith, time was everything. Without it, there was nothing. He could feel the pulse of the rift behind him, tugging at his very essence. It whispered, like a dream half remembered, and suddenly, it became clear to him. "If we give up our time," Jaxthar said slowly, his voice firm but reflective, "we lose not just our lives, but the future, the potential of what we could become. A civilization without time is nothing more than an echo." Henderson nodded solemnly, looking to the rest of their crew. "But without this, we risk the entire universe collapsing into chaos. We cannot allow that." There must be another way. The Watcher's form seemed to flicker, almost as if it were considering their words. Indeed, it spoke, its voice growing softer, more contemplative. You are correct. Your willingness to sacrifice all you know, to face the inevitable, is what binds you to this decision. But I will offer you a choice, one that you must take together, Zorith and humanity. A low hum began to emanate from the vortex, and the chamber seemed to tremble. You can give your time to stabilize the rift, but in doing so, you will lose your future. Alternatively, you can choose to leave this place, and in doing so, allow the rift to collapse in on itself. All will be undone, and everything you know, everything, will be lost. The silence in the chamber stretched as they processed the gravity of the decision before them. For Jaxthar, the path was clear. His people had faced countless hardships, but they had always fought to live. To give up their future now would be an unthinkable loss. For humanity, however, the decision wasn't as simple. We didn't come this far to walk away, Commander Henderson said, her voice filled with unshakable conviction. We've fought for too long to turn back now. I don't care what the cost is. We protect the future. Jaxthar looked at her, his respect for the humans growing with every passing moment. They were unlike any species he had ever encountered, willing to risk everything for the chance to preserve not just their own future, but the very future of the universe. You are right, Jaxthar said with a grim nod. We cannot allow this rift to consume everything. The price, we must pay it, together. The Watcher paused, as if evaluating their resolve. Then, it spoke once more. You will pay your time, your very lives, and in return, the rift shall remain stable. But know this, the cost of your sacrifice will ripple throughout your timelines. Every moment lost will echo in ways you cannot yet fathom. A deep, echoing silence filled the chamber as the Watcher raised its arms, or perhaps it was its tendrils, toward the vortex. The entire station seemed to shift, the energy swirling as if gathering strength from their decision. They could feel it, deep in their bones, the cold, gnawing sensation of time slipping away. We accept the cost, Henderson said, her voice steady despite the enormity of the sacrifice. We will give whatever it takes to preserve the universe. The Watcher nodded, its form shimmering in the dim light. Very well. With a sudden burst of light, the station around them seemed to fold in on itself. The very essence of time seemed to bend, stretching and warping as if the universe itself were responding to their willingness to sacrifice. Jaxthar felt at first a deep, aching pull at his soul, as if years of his life were slipping away. He could see it reflected in the eyes of the human soldiers beside him, their expressions taut with the knowledge of what they were losing. The vortex flared brightly, sending waves of energy crashing through the chamber. The Watcher's final words echoed in their minds. You have made your choice. The future is now yours to shape. But remember, not all costs can be measured in time. And with that, the light consumed them, and the world, no, the very fabric of reality, changed. When Jaxthar next opened his eyes, he was no longer in the station. The rift had collapsed, the station now reduced to a pile of ancient debris, floating in the vast emptiness of space. The Zorith and human fleets were intact, their ships still whole, though the lingering weight of what they had given was palpable. For a moment, there was silence, and then the voice of Commander Henderson crackled over the calms. We did it. Jaxthar turned toward her, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what they had just sacrificed. But even in that moment, something shifted inside him. Humanity had given up the future. They had lost time, but they had saved everything that mattered, everything that had the potential to matter. We did, he replied, his voice filled with both sorrow and pride. As the fleet turned toward home, one thing was clear, the universe had been saved, but it came at a cost they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. The unimaginable had become reality, and the true weight of their sacrifice had only just begun to be understood. But there was one final truth that Jaxthar knew deep in his soul. When humanity owed you a favor, the unimaginable wasn't just a possibility, it was a certainty. And in the end, it was always worth it. When humanity owes you a favor, prepare for the unimaginable. Part 6. The weeks that followed were a blur. The sacrifice had been made, the rift had stabilized, and the universe, at least for now, was safe. But the cost was something none of them could escape. Every time Jaxthar looked at his reflection, there was a weight in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The time he had lost, and the time humanity had given up, hung over him like an invisible shadow, unseen but always present. Commander Henderson, too, felt the shift. In the quiet moments after the rift collapsed, she could almost feel the years slipping away. The sacrifice of time, of future, wasn't something you could simply ignore. It was woven into the fabric of their beings now, a constant reminder of what they had chosen to protect. Yet, as the fleets returned to their respective homeworlds, there was something else in the air. A shared understanding had formed between the Zorith and humanity, something stronger than alliances and military pacts. It was the bond forged through the unimaginable, the knowledge that they had both lost something, but had gained so much more in return. The universe had been saved, but what kind of universe were they returning to? Back on Earth, in a command center deep beneath the surface, Henderson stood overlooking a digital map of the galaxy. The room was filled with the hum of equipment and the steady presence of officers, all working tirelessly to ensure the recovery of their forces. Yet Henderson's mind wasn't on the mundane tasks at hand. She was thinking of the future that had been taken from them. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Jaxthar entered, his expression more thoughtful than usual. His eyes, though unchanged in their sharpness, held an unspoken sadness. They had both carried the burden, but they were facing the aftermath in different ways. "You've been staring at that map for hours," Jaxthar remarked quietly. "The future doesn't look any clearer when you look at it long enough." Henderson didn't turn, but she smiled faintly. "I'm thinking, Jaxthar, wondering if we can still build a future. After everything we've lost, time is a gift, and we've sacrificed so much of it. But we're still standing, aren't we?" Jaxthar stepped closer, his voice carrying a solemn understanding. "Yes, we are, but we are different now. We know what it's like to give up something so precious, and we also know that we're not alone in carrying that burden. The Zorith, we've seen a glimpse of what humanity is capable of, and I can see it in your eyes. We are stronger because of what we've shared." Henderson looked at him, meeting his gaze. "That's what keeps me going," she admitted. "We've lost time, but we haven't lost hope. We've formed a bond, humanity and Zorith, greater than anything I could have imagined." "And what do we do with that bond?" Jaxthar asked. "We build something better," Henderson replied. "We ensure that no matter the cost, we never have to make that kind of sacrifice again. We preserve the future by protecting what we have left of it." Her voice was steady, but there was a fierce determination in her words. The universe, despite the near-apocalyptic threat, still had so much to offer. They had come too far to allow everything to collapse into chaos now. Across the galaxy, the news spread. The Zorith and humans had faced the unimaginable, had paid a terrible price, and yet, against all odds, they had emerged victorious. There were no grand celebrations, no parades. The sacrifice was too deep, the cost too heavy for that. But there was unity now, a new kind of unity between the races, an unspoken promise that they would stand together, no matter what came next. In the months that followed, humanity and Zorith began to rebuild, not just their fleets, or their infrastructure, but something far more important: trust. What had once been a tenuous alliance forged in the fires of war was now a partnership born of shared sacrifice. They began to work side by side, sharing technology, knowledge, and ideas in ways that had seemed impossible before the Rift incident. Commander Henderson was at the forefront of this new era. She worked closely with Jaxthar, leading the joint efforts to monitor the Rift's stability and to protect against any future threats. Together, they traveled to the furthest reaches of the galaxy, making sure the universe they had saved would remain intact. But their bond went beyond leadership. They were two people who understood the true cost of victory. And sometimes, when they stood side by side, looking out at the stars, they both felt it, the lingering weight of the time they had lost. A reminder, always, that the universe was fragile, that nothing was guaranteed. One evening, after a long day of strategizing with their teams, Henderson and Jaxthar found themselves on the observation deck of a new joint station, built above Earth's orbit. The stars glittered silently around them, and for the first time in months, Henderson allowed herself to relax. The sense of duty and loss would always be there, but they had made it this far. They were still alive. The universe hadn't collapsed. Not yet. "I never thought it would end this way," Henderson said, her voice soft, her gaze focused on the stars. I thought we'd lose everything, that we wouldn't have anything left. Jaxthar stood beside her, his expression unreadable. Sometimes, loss is the price of survival, but I've come to understand, survival is enough. The future may be uncertain, but as long as we keep moving forward, it's still worth fighting for. They both stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the long road ahead. There was still so much to do, still so many unknowns. But the rift was stable, the unimaginable had been faced, and humanity, alongside the Zorith, would rebuild. The universe had been given a second chance. And as Henderson turned to face Jaxthar, there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. They had faced the unimaginable and come through it, together. And that was a future worth fighting for. The end.